Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Practical Liberty. My name's Henry Bingaman. Have you ever fantasized about just quitting your job, picking up, and leaving to travel the world? I mean, most of us have at some point, but it just doesn't seem practical. There's life, there's work, there's family and kids. Um, but, too much stuff holding you back. But what if you could? Today's guest is Daniel Prince. I just finished reading his book, Choose Life, where it details his kind of adventure of doing just that, picking up and leaving a steady career and traveling the world with his wife and four kids. He's also the host of the Once Bitten podcast about Bitcoin. So we're going to get into some Bitcoin stuff, I'm sure. But Daniel, thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me. Really happy to be part of it, and thank you to our mutual friend who set this up. I'll leave it to you to
Oh,
give him a
Jethro,
shout out.
I'll
Yeah,
give Jethro. I gave Jethro a shout out in the last one too. He's been circling in my world for a little while now. He's an interesting person, a real go getter, which I can appreciate people like that.
absolutely.
So I can't just leave that tease hanging. I want to get into a little bit of your intro story. You kind of had the classic life, and then picked up and left it all. So do you want to tell the origin story just so we get all the details right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, the nutshell story just keeps getting longer somehow. As I get older, I suppose that's a natural byproduct of that. But I grew up in the southeast of the UK, did all the normal things, like went to the state school, public in air quotes, in nice cushy air quotes, education system, and then found myself following my father's footsteps into the city of London, into a job in the foreign exchange markets. Is where I started my career at the age of 19. I didn't go to university at that stage. This was in 1995. At that stage, the American marketing campaign of like pushing university degrees onto every single corner of the earth hadn't really taken hold in the UK. It was a few years after that it did. So I didn't need a degree or a certificate or a framed piece of paper on the wall for me to walk into the financial markets. What you did need were street smarts, an ability to think for yourself, think quickly, and work hard, quite frankly, because you had to be in there at 6 a.m., parking people's cars and getting their sandwiches and getting their dry cleaning and getting their cash from the ATM and taking their shoes down to the shoe cleaner and all of these jobs, go for jobs, which nobody with a 4 year degree would ever consider doing, right? So that's uh, that's where you could find a little edge. And I just loved that experience and being around people that weren't your age anymore, right? Because you'd been trapped in a system from the age of 5 where the only people you ever socialized with were people within your direct, like 9 months age range. To be then put in front of people that were 25 to 55 and everybody treated you with the same amount of respect or disdain, then you suddenly realized, oh, right, what have I been doing for the last 15 years? I can add value here just by doing these simple tasks for them, and I can earn their respect just from doing these simple tasks from them, for them. Excuse me. So that artist, that you cut your teeth in that world, or you used to at least, for 2 or 3 years, and then you get your shot at a seat at the table. Um, I had to take a little bit longer because in '97 or '98, the euro, the single currency of this part of the world, started rearing its ugly head, and you didn't need to quote dollar mark anymore, which was the most um, liquid and widely traded currency pair on the whole planet.
The
Dollar
Deutschmark
against
was
Deutschmark. Yes,
interesting.
absolutely. That desk alone, we had a dollar mark A desk, a dollar mark B desk, and a dollar mark C desk. All of the others just had one desk. That's how huge it was. It was incredible. That was shut down overnight as soon as the euro single currency scheme came into play. I had to find myself a job on a different part of the company. I found myself on the foreign exchange options desk, which was still heavily voice brokered, because what has also been happening was like that first kind of touch of AI. Voice brokerage had been taken over by robot brokerage, which was doing the same thing, just quoting two numbers down a microphone. So that all started changing for me. Then I got the opportunity to go and cover the desk in Singapore because two guys had left unexpectedly and they needed some cover over there. So they just sent the most junior guy, and over I went. And I spent 8 weeks in Singapore and 2 weeks in Tokyo at the age of 21. Was offered three jobs at three different companies in that short space of time. It turned my head upside down. I couldn't believe the opportunity you had over there. I couldn't believe how incredible that part of the world was. And I'm like, wow, okay, let's go. Uh, so I moved over there with my girlfriend at the time, who then became my wife pretty quickly due to visa issues, but that's a whole different story. And we ended up spending 15 years there. So my bulk of my career was in foreign exchange options brokerage in Singapore. And we had our four kids over there. And towards the end of that time, I was starting to feel a little bit jaded by the whole thing. I mean, it's a great experience when you're a young man and you have expendable income and you lived in Asia where your dollar or your pound went a long way compared to, the local currencies. And you could travel so easily. Singapore just being a hub of travel, we could, and my wife having to do visa runs every 2 weeks or 1 month. We just started exploring the whole region and we fell in love with travel and we fell in love with Asia and different cultures and different foods and different ways of thinking. And it just kind of like upturned everything that we'd ever been taught or been exposed to just growing up in, a single town in the southeast of England in Essex County. That become just that shaped us more than I think we'll ever give credit for. But I'd realized I was coming to an end of my career when targets were painted on people's backs, especially the older guys on the desk. And at the age of 37, I was considered old in that business. And I just knew that the knives were coming out, especially after 2008. Everything started changing, everything was consolidating. And I knew I didn't want to be there anymore. And I read a book called The 4 Hour Work Week, which I'm sure many of your listeners are probably aware of, by Tim Ferriss. And that turned my life upside down. The thing that put a knife through my heart was this idea of me realizing that I was the NPC, the non-player character, living a deferred lifestyle. Because I would sit there each day and I'd put my computer on. I'd have the four screens, classic Wall Street look. I've got Bloomberg over here, Reuters over here. I've got all of the rates over there. I've got two phones and a microphone. Everybody starts chirping at 6 a.m. and it's just like dog eat dog world. And like, I can't be doing this anymore. Like for another 20 fucking years as well. Like, no way can I do this anymore. And I knew on the 1st of January, 2012, that I had to start plotting my escape. And that's when everything just started snowballing. And that's where all of the, it was art. Yeah. So I read the 4 Hour Work Week in November for the first time, November 2013. So it's taken a long time to extract myself. And by May 2014, we were gone. We had sold everything we owned and we started traveling the world as a family of six. And the kids were aged 8, 6, and 2 3-year-old twins.
That's
So,
pretty amazing to be able to just pick up. And I mean, people
yeah,
get so attached to not just stuff, but their life as they know it. So like when you're young, you kind of get you think you have a vision of what you want, right? You think, oh, this brokerage thing, I can make a lot of money, I can live in Singapore or anywhere in the world. Like this is the life for me. And people get attached to a vision like that and don't know how to let go. So it's not just letting go of your stuff; it's letting go of your past visions. So I guess how did you get to that point where you were able to let go of the old vision? Was it just burn out on it, or there's a sunk cost fallacy that people fall for. I think it's like, well, I put
yeah,
15 17 years into this career, I can't just walk away from it now. How did you kind of break out of that mindset?
it's so difficult. It really is. A lot of introspection, I would say. And there's so much keeping you there, really. And the sunk cost fallacy is real. Um, and you have to face it. And those days of making that decision are very dark. Um, what I found darker though was the fact that I come to the realization that I've been wearing a mask probably since the age of 5. That's your first day at school. It's probably even younger now. I know in France here, they take kids away from their families at the age of 3. And I think in the US, you've got kindy and pre-kindy. And I think you even think like your pre-kindy puts you on, like you get gaslit into believing you're being put on the road to Harvard or something absolutely. So from that young of an age, you're wearing a mask because you've got to be someone or something else just to survive in that arena of toxicity that is forced association. It's not socialization. I want to
Yeah,
knock
yeah,
that right on the head. There is no socializing that happens in an institutionalized education hellhole that is also known as a state school or public school. Like I said, they use the word public just to fluff it up a little bit because it's free education, it's a human right. You're like, no, you motherfuckers, like this is sick. And when I realized like my sunk cost fallacy of being an international money broker or whatever fucking stupid things we used to call ourselves, or a VP of this, or a head of that, or director of this, that they're all little tricks that are so easy to fish you up the ladder, up the corporate ladder, because all of that kind of bait has been laid for you since you were 5 and worked your way through that programming of the education system into your corporate life, and up that corporate ladder you go. And sure as day, life is linear, and you're going to get the white picket fence and the 2.4 kids, although they want you to have 0.4 kids now because we are the carbon that they want to
right.
eliminate. Then you start realizing all of that starts breaking down. And it just takes one step to the left or one step to the right to get out of that laser beam of just nonsense to actually start thinking a little bit more critically. So that was way more powerful coming to that realization than facing a sunk cost fallacy, which was being forced down my throat by friends, relatives, like, Dad, what are you talking about? You're 17 years into this career. You're just about, you can't walk away. You might be running the desk next year. Like, I couldn't give a fuck. I really couldn't. Like, I come to that realization is like, no, there's something else, and it isn't this. And I've got to take at least a roll on the dice. So my wife and I started having the long discussions. She thought I was crazy the first couple of months. She's read the 4 Hour Work Week by osmosis because I would just sit there reading aloud paragraphs and listen to this bit and listen to this bit. And she thought I was becoming deranged with visions of grandeur of becoming an entrepreneur and traveling the world and being nomadic and all of that kind of stuff. But because I wouldn't let it go and we kept having discussions, and she knew inherently that there was something wrong with the education system our kids were being exposed to, because of inflationary nature of currencies. Everything was getting very, very expensive after 2008. So come 2012, 13, even though I was earning a good wage, we were running 1,000 miles an hour to stand still and still be net zero at the end of the month. I'm like, I can't do this. There's more to life. And so we started doing more and more research into what does this ultimately mean if we take the kids out of school, because we knew we wanted to travel. If we take the kids out of school and we start to travel, has anyone done that before? And yeah, of course, you're not the first idiots to have had that, kind of epiphany. And there's even a small chapter in the book, or a small paragraph in the book, about a French family that went traveling around the world in a sailboat. So then we started looking at that, and then we started looking at different families that were doing it. And on Tim's blog, he had a guy on there called Brandon Pierce, who was traveling the world with his wife and 3 children, who I just bumped into at the Bitcoin Miami conference, who was the first person I reached out to when I wanted to ask questions about world schooling, who wrote the foreword for my book, Choose Life.
I thought I recognized the name.
How weird. Like all of these things just come into an amazing circle. And, it proves again that like the fact that we're all connected and, the world works in mysterious ways and whatever, but always for the better and for the good. Um, just by putting yourself out there, these things start happening. So then we realized, there's a whole bunch of families that are already doing this. And this was back in 2013. And since then, like here we are 10 years later, it's just ballooned. I mean, you have the people doing the van life, you have the people doing the overlanding, which is van life in these most amazing four-wheel vehicles that will absolutely go anywhere. And you have the people in the sailboats, and you have people like us that did it that just relied on home swapping opportunities where we could get accommodation for free or house sitting opportunities, and then just kind of piecing that journey together. Do we take a boat? Do we drive? Do we hire a car? Do we get an RV? Do we take a plane? What are the low cost airlines? And you just join these groups, whether they're on Instagram or whether they're on Facebook or whether they're on Nostr or wherever these days. And you find your people, you find your tribe. And these people are so welcoming, and they have done it before, and they know the problems, and they know how to get over them, and they know what to expect, and they can help you. And that's what we fell into. So we found the confidence. You clear the barrier of, we're not crazy. Like other people do this. You need the social proof, and that's what we found. And then we started looking closer at taking kids out of formal education. Like, I'm not so keen on that. Maybe we've got to get a curriculum booklet together or something. So then you start falling down that rabbit hole, and then you bump heads with people like Sir Ken Robinson and his talk, "Do Schools Kill Creativity?" which he delivered pre-iPhone in 2007. And you're like, whoa, this is incredible.
Yeah.
Somebody of this standing that can speak in this way. And then Peter Gray in his book Free to Learn, and then John Holt and all of his work through the 50s, the 60s, and the 70s, and how children learn, and his other books. And again, you find confidence, you find validation in these people's work and their message. So we're like, right, okay, we're set. What do we do about money? Naturally, we had managed to save, hadn't spent everything on Ferraris and Gucci loafers like many of my contemporaries who are still sat at a desk looking at you guys with the side eye. So I knew we would have 9 months, and probably after 9 months, I'd just be able to hit the telephones and dip into the network and get some kind of job somewhere. But 9 months turned into 2.5 years because we found the ability through home swapping to take accommodation costs, which was going to be our biggest cost, down to almost zero. So on we went, and we just pushed it for as long as we could.
So you went that whole time on savings alone?
Yeah, yeah,
That's pretty
absolutely.
impressive.
Yeah. It's cheaper to travel the world long term than it is to sit still in your current situation.
Yeah,
That
it's
turns people's heads upside down. It turned mine upside down. And every single person, every single world schooler that I've spoken to has came to the same conclusion. They're like, this is wild. Like my bills and my commitments at home far outweighed anything that I'm spending on the road 24/7 on perpetual, holiday in air quotes, because it's not, it becomes another way of life. But that is the truth. And it's crazy.
well, people don't realize how expensive I think the West is, the West in
Mhm.
air quotes. Like, I teach a course on freelancing, so I know a lot of freelancers. And some people, they make $75,000 a year, but they live in Thailand and they live
Right.
like absolute royalty. People there
Yep.
think they're the wealthiest people they've ever met. And some of them, in some cases, they are the wealthiest people they ever met. And they work 10 hours, 20 hours a week, maybe. So
Yep.
America is, we're the cause of inflation around the world mostly. So we're the center of the inflation and the high costs. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of other opportunities in the world to have a great life at much lower costs. But it's funny, I've kind of taken the opposite path of you. You got frustrated with your career and wanted to roam around the world and see everything. I got frustrated with my living situation. I lived in a city, a big city, Philadelphia, for
Mhm.
12 years about. And in the 2020, I was like, I got to get out of here. It was too much. So I bought 15 acres in the woods, and I'm kind of starting a kind of homesteading lifestyle. So I'm planting myself as firmly as you can plant. But again, it's the same kind of, it's weird to people, but you can find your communities and you can build a network of people who think like you, and validate what you're doing, because it is kind of interesting. We both kind of think differently and live differently. And so one of the questions I'm always struggling with myself with is, am I crazy? Because everybody's telling me I'm crazy. Am I just different, or am I seeing the world more clearly? So, like, I get one of the things, I guess, how do you check yourself that you're seeing the world as clearly as you can and not just acting crazy? Because there's a lot of pressure on people to
Mhm.
think like, no, you just have to conform. There's so much conformity pressure that it's hard to resist. And you know, I don't know. Do you ever ask yourself if you're crazy or if you're just different?
Yeah, I've given up asking that, to be honest. After what I saw during COVID, I just realized, my fucking God, like, the world has, it literally went crazy.
Yeah.
And seeing people now as non-player characters, and then linking that to the education system, like three full generations, if you look back to where it really came into earnest after Second World War, socialism, and how it's created this like moronic zombie-like behavior with so many people, and entitlement as well. Like, people are just that they want to know what they're entitled to rather than actually go out there and do the work. Now, when like homesteading is a perfect example. If you want to sustain yourself, that's a shit ton of work. It's not like, let's throw some seeds in the ground and hope for the best. There's all kinds of rotation you've got to figure out. You've got to figure out the best way to fertilize it, especially if you want to be completely free of all of the rubbish products out there. And not only that, if you want meat, you've got to figure out how to raise the animals, and then you've got to be prepared to kill them, to skin them, to gut them, to uh, prep that food once it's been done. Whether you're drying it, salting it, whether you're eating it fresh, how do you store it? There's a huge amount that you have to take on yourself. It's not like you're outsourcing that work to your local supermarket. So I think once you come to the realization that you see things differently, it's so important to find those groups of people that are doing that as well, and get along and meet these people in real life. And this happens in Bitcoin too, because we, eh, there's a group of people here that realized, huh, our money, what we call money, which actually we should be calling currency, our currency, which isn't money, and we'll get into that. Our currency is completely manipulated by a very few completely centralized forces who have carte blanche over what they do and how to control us, and force us to use this as a currency, as a medium of exchange. And through that, they can completely control everything. They can control and create the society they want, because not only do they own that, but they also own the messaging system, the mainstream media, whether that's the newspapers or the Fox News, CNBC, Squawk Box, BBC that we have in the UK, RTL, whatever we have here in France. Um, you have no chance of thinking critically if that is your day to day.
Right.
Get up, go to the office, get gaslit by the radio, get gaslit by the newspaper, get gaslit by the internet, newspapers, whatever you're reading, fall into pointless conversations at the water cooler with everybody else who's thinking the same, because their opinion has literally been handed to them on a plate that morning via the mainstream media, and then go home to your family to ignore your teenager who's being moody. They're not being moody, by the way. They're just absolutely being destroyed by the education system, and they're completely knackered, and they've got 2 hours of homework facing them. And you just get up again and rinse and repeat. That's no way to live. And but that's great because everybody does that. So you feel comfortable. So when you challenge that, when you step up and say, no, this is bullshit, you're the outsider. You are a threat because all of a sudden you represent the complete opposite to what they believe and what they've been told. So when I was trying to make the break and when you've made your break, you were probably getting told, you're crazy. You're not living real life. I'm a parent. I have 4 kids. You've been an irresponsible parent to your children by taking them out of the school system.
And the people sending their kids to the child abuse factories are the ones telling you that.
Exactly. That's the thing. That's how far we've fallen. The, to be, and this is something that homeschoolers or world schoolers or unschoolers, alternative education families, whatever people call them these days, because there's a name for everybody, of course, you know that. To be told that you are an irresponsible parent when you've made the conscious decision to be in complete control of your child's education is complete. What are you saying? I'm being purely responsible now. This is on me. I'm not outsourcing it to faceless teachers who I might meet once per year at a parents' evening. I'm not just taking the easy option of like, yeah, off you go, little Jimmy, on the big yellow bus. Have a great time. Get some good grades. And if you don't get good grades, don't worry, I'll blame your teacher. And that's complete and utter irresponsible behavior. You just knee-jerk outsourcing it because you're running at 1,000 miles an hour. Both parents have to be at work because, like you said earlier, inflation. And I wrote that down because I want to make sure people understand the exact definition of inflation because that has been changed over time. The real definition of inflation is an increase in the monetary supply. It's not prices going up willy-nilly and inflation is good for the economy like we're taught at university in economics at 101 by your Keynesian gaslit professor. It's like, no, the definition of inflation is an increase in the monetary supply. Look what's been happening since 2008. This is crazy. This is absolutely nuts.
You can go back to 2001 when, George W. Bush decided to invade Iraq and then Afghanistan. He had to print the money to do that. We didn't have the money. There's no way to raise enough income tax to pay for $8 trillion in war. So you have to print the money if you want these wars, which is, as a libertarian, it's one of the reasons we focus so much on money. But before we get that to there, I do want to, people with the education system, people don't know the history of it. It was our education system is modeled after the Prussian model. And the Prussians started that model because they lost to Napoleon in the early Napoleonic Wars. And the Prussian emperor, whatever he was called at the time, he blamed it on the soldiers thinking for themselves. So they literally started the public school system to stop people from thinking from themselves. And then that just spread all over the world. So I don't understand how people think you're getting educated in schools when it's purely for indoctrination. There's no other purpose of it. They don't teach you any life skills. They don't teach you anything helpful.
No, and keep going. You got to riff on Horace Mann because I don't think enough people know who this guy is.
Yeah, we were talking right before we started recording about kind of the education system. My second episode ever was on the education system. And Horace Mann literally went to Prussia. He saw what was happening over there and he brought it back to America. And I dug up a bunch of quotes from him. And he basically said parents shouldn't be involved in the education. The state should own the children, I think was one of his actual literal quotes. So you can't, if you want to own your own children or have responsibility for your own children, public school is the exact wrong place to send them. Public schools are to create good citizens, and good citizens means to benefit the state. It doesn't mean to enrich them and have a good, healthy, long life and become productive, become an entrepreneur. You don't learn any of that in school. You learn how to sit still, shut up, and pay attention. And that's what they want. They want you to sit still, shut up, pay attention, and don't ask questions that aren't on the curriculum. And it's just infuriating.
It was literally to kill entrepreneurship. Entrepreneur to most people, the word just instills butterflies in their tummy. Now, this is how far we've fallen because they look at people like Bill Gates, Richard Branson, and Mark Zuckerberg, these unicorns, these great entrepreneurs. If only we could ever be like them. It's like, entrepreneurship is our default state. That's
Right.
what we do. We see problems, we iterate, and we try and solve them. Everybody listening to this who's never thought that they were good enough to be an entrepreneur probably has 1,000 business ideas per day, because they get on the train and they're like, this freaking seat is just so uncomfortable. Why the hell would someone design a seat like? You just had a business idea that's going to impact millions of people in a good way. But because you've been completely annihilated, back to Sir Ken Robinson, do schools kill creativity? Yes, that's their point. They're not there to celebrate your unique and your unique individual creativity and skill set. They're there to destroy it.
Mhm.
You need to be destroyed. Your uniqueness needs destroying. The reason you were looking out the window as a kid was because that was your subconscious rallying against what was happening in front of you, being sat in a classroom of 30 people in front of a flapping head, being forced into trying to learn something. And there was a huge difference between teaching and learning. What goes on there is teaching, not learning. Learning happens naturally. Learning happens when you are alone, when you're immersed in something. Learning happens when you've spent 5 hours doing something and you thought it was 5 minutes. Teaching is when you spend 5 hours doing something and it was only 45 minutes and you're just praying for the bell. So this this notion that entrepreneurs are these special beings that should be, looked upon as like fucking Elon, like people put him up on a pedestal. Oh, what a god. He's like, no, he's not. And you can do exactly the same because you have those powers. It's just that you've been taught into thinking that you don't. And Parker went off on a massive tangent. I can't remember what we were talking about beforehand. Horace
It's
Mann.
yeah,
Right.
we're getting back there.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Uh,
interesting. One of the things I teach in my freelance course, which is freelancing isn't really entrepreneurship, but
mhm.
it's a form of being independent. It's kind of entrepreneurship. You're working with a lot of different businesses. You are your own LLC, so you get all the tax benefits, which is great. But I have to teach people. It's literally the first lesson is how to find their skills and how to like. People have been trained to think that they're not good at things, which is amazing, and that they don't
Mhm.
recognize their inherent differences and the value that they can provide other people. And that's really all entrepreneurship is at the end of the day. You're providing value for other people and sharing it, which you do as an employee, and you're not compensated nearly as well as you could be. So, like having some level of entrepreneurial spirit, I think is it. It breaks people out of the NPC mode because you can't be an NPC
Mhm.
and an entrepreneur.
This idea of certification is where it comes in. Everybody's been
Right.
completely led to believe that you can only do something if you have a certificate. And let me tell you right now, if I ever meet someone that's got a certificate or a diploma or a freaking framed certificate, master's, MBA, whatever, in entrepreneurship, I know you're not an entrepreneur. Like that's the biggest red flag, because you've just followed someone else to teach you how to become an entrepreneur. It makes no sense. Same with MBAs, and I'm probably going to trigger a lot of people. By the way, you just sat for 4 years and you've paid 240 grand, which is a bad business decision, first of all. Even worse if you're an economics major, like you just failed in my fucking eyes. An F, a straight F. If you pay $240,000 for somebody to teach you economics, is a bad economic decision. You know, like the guy that's teaching you the MBA course has never run a business. He's
That's
a
the most amazing
professor.
thing. Yeah, that these people they don't go pull retired CEOs or retired CFOs to teach those courses. It's somebody else that learned it
They
from.
might pull one in for an hour,
Yeah, but
but like the other 4 years.
it's infuriating. So I lived in Philadelphia for a long time, so I dealt with Wharton people every once in a while. These Wharton students, and they were, I don't mean to generalize, but they were pretty much all terrible people. Like they were terrible to serving staff. They were terrible. They just were so entitled. They thought because they had the IQ essentially to get into Wharton and connections, usually their parents were connected somehow, um, that they were just better than anyone else. And they would try to tell you how to do business. And I'm like, look, dudes, I could make $1 million a year as a freelancer. And how much did you just pay for your stupid, Wharton degree that you're going to take 40 years to get back, and you're going to, you know, get saddled down with a mortgage that you can barely afford. So you're going to have to stay for the next promotion, the next. It's like, who is here actually the smart one? it's just frustrating to see.
And I would also love to know how much the what they called over there, endowment funds
Yeah, the
of these
endowments.
universities. Like some of these, they're in the billions.
Oh, Penn's is definitely in the billion. I mean, it's one of the Ivy League schools. It's, you know,
So if they were really worried about like free education as a human right, why are school fees going up every year? Where does that money go? Well, it goes, they're a business, is what people don't understand. They're a business. You are just a customer, but you're forced to believe that if you don't have that piece of paper, you'll never be able to enter the workforce. Whereas in reality, to enter the workforce, you just have to add value to someone. I've spoken to God knows how many like CEOs. They don't even look at CVs. They don't care about this stuff. It's gone. It's over. It's finished. But because of this messaging that is so strong, and you can look back at well, Hollywood pushed this so hard as well. All of these these classic universities films that we've grown up watching, they're recruitment drives. It's because even though if you don't want to go because you're not truly involved with the or deeply interested in the topic that you're going to study, at least you're going to go and get fucked up and have a great time, right? And party for 4 years. That's what people are generally going for and paying for. It's such a messed up world, and it's created the society that we have today.
yeah, I went to college because I was expected to go to college. That was really the only reason.
Right.
I didn't know. I went undeclared. I was just going. I went to I went to Pitt, which is a pretty decent school, but it's not Ivy League or anything. But it's like, I don't know. That was just the best school I got into, so that's where I went because I was one of the smart kids in school. So this is the track you're on, and then figure it out.
Mhm.
it's, but yeah, I don't use anything I learned in my college classes. I don't even remember half the classes that I took. I took astronomy classes and archaeology classes. Like, I've learned more on YouTube than I ever did in college, which is amazing.
Mhm.
So
Exactly.
I want to get into your kind of second origin story, because when you wrote
Yep.
your Choose Life book, you weren't as orange pilled, I guess we'd call it. You weren't into Bitcoin
Yeah.
at that time. I didn't see it in the book anyway. So how did you kind of get down that Bitcoin rabbit hole?
Yeah. So I was going down two rabbit holes like a greased monkey at 1,000 miles an hour at the same time. Because once we'd checked out of um, my job and we started to travel, we we had time, right? That is the true currency in our life, time, because time is scarce, time is finite. That's all we have, literally, time. And all of a sudden, I had it. It was no one else's. It was mine. So I could put my mind to the most important things facing our family and our existence on this planet, on the things that needed being resolved, and that was education for my kids. That's why I found all of the resources that we've already touched on. And the other thing was money. What is money? I'd worked in foreign exchange for 18 years. I had never heard the term fiat currency ever in that time. Uh, and that blew me away when I started learning about that. And I obviously needed to find a way to store my money. Now, when we left Singapore, the first one of the last things I did, and probably one of the first real steps into the Bitcoin rabbit hole, was I went to a. This is a great thing about Singapore. You just go to a shopping mall and there's a physical gold and silver shop just there, selling gold bars, silver bars, coins from all over the world and whatever else. And they had a facility out at Changi Airport where they could store it for you. So I just went and bought a bunch of 1 kilo silver bars and some gold coins. Thank you very much. I'll pay the $250, whatever it was a year for the storage fees, and I know I can store my wealth. I believe that this is a good store of value. So off we went on the travels, and I would be forever trying to pick the stock, this, that, and the other thing. You know, what's gonna be the next unicorn? What's gonna happen next? Where's the next tech wave coming in? And heavily invested in Tesla back in those days because I believed, turned out wrongly, that the world was going to electrify and we were going to get off fossil fuels and all of this kind of stuff. Uh, and kept bumping up against Bitcoin. And I'd already bumped up against it several times and dismissed it because during my career, you do not challenge the almighty dollar, especially if that is the hand that feeds you. And my job was to broker foreign exchange deals between, the world's biggest banks. So I was full of ego, full of hubris, and I'd been doing it 15, 17 years, whatever, when Bitcoin first, arrived on the scene. And nowhere in the world some weird internet geeks were going to invent money and usurp the US dollar. And I remember the day the Mount Gox hack happened. So for listeners that aren't aware, MT Gox, Mount Gox, was a Bitcoin exchange based out of Tokyo, which was hacked, if I got my time right, 2013, and people lost their Bitcoin. I thought that was the end of Bitcoin because I thought Mount Gox were running Bitcoin. I was still in this centralized mindset. I thought Bitcoin was a company and there was a founder and there was a CEO and there was a CTO and there was a COO. So my goodness, did I have a lot more to learn. And I started learning more about that in 2014 after we'd left and after we started traveling, and I was watching more and more investment videos. And I was friends with Grant Williams in Singapore. He's the co-founder, the original co-founder of Real Vision. And I started watching a lot of their work and their long form interviews. And I was blown away by it. And I remember having an interview with Grant, and I asked him, "You going to cover Bitcoin at any stage, or do you just think it's like a little bit?" He's like, "Yeah, we got some interviews coming up." And sure enough, on came Wences Casares, Tura Demista, and Trace Mayer are the ones that I distinctly remember. And their message was like, that was like a huge, it's like me hitting a brick wall, like my ego hitting a brick wall. Like, wow, these guys know what they're talking about, and they're presenting Bitcoin and the history of money and everything else in such an incredible manner. I had to learn more. And I just couldn't stop. Like I said, learning. When you start learning, you can't stop. So that's when I found Andreas Antonopoulos and started reading his books. And well, no, before his books, started watching his talks and listening to his messaging. And since then, I can accredit so many Bitcoiners for their work. The Bitcoin Standard, obviously, by Saifedean Ammous. People like Andy Edstrom, who wrote Why Buy Bitcoin, Knut Svanholm, who's written 4 books now about Bitcoin. These people and articles like Robert Breedlove's articles started dropping, and then the podcasts I found. John Vallis has a great podcast, Stefan Livera, Peter McCormack, Brady Swenson was running a podcast back in those days. I couldn't stop. It was just soaking into me, and it made so much sense that I knew that this is going to change the world, and I knew that I needed to start storing my value outside of the manipulated crash cycle burn system that's engineered, and into something that is available to everybody rather than just the accredited investors, like the like the usual fiat system. Cannot be manipulated, is not controlled by anybody, and it is an open and immutable database that is completely like nothing else humanity has ever seen. I wanted in. So I started exploring that with my actual fiat currencies. And ever since then, I've just carried on shooting down the rabbit hole. I started my own podcast in January 2020, up to 350 episodes. We're close to 1 million downloads in total. I know that's not a lot compared to some of the other shows out there, but very proud of the fact that people that listen to the show are going to get educated in something that they would never have ever been exposed to in how many years of schooling they would have ever have had. So there's an element of Austrian economics in there. There's an element of homeschooling in there. Uh, the history of money is in there. Um, it's it's anthropological. It's these journeys you go on when you start learning about money, like true money, and how we are the only species on this planet that use a medium of exchange to communicate valuable value to each other and information. You you cannot stop your mind firing. The epiphanies just keep dropping, and you lose sleep as well because you can't stop thinking about it. And this is true of anybody that has really set aside. I'd say you only have to set aside 5 to 10 hours just to begin with on podcasts or books or YouTube videos, just to dip your toe, just to like, are these guys just a bunch of crazies like they say they are in the mainstream media? Bunch of geeky, shadowy super coders, toxic, libertarian, anarcho capitalist kind of freak shows that want to, you know, exit society. Like, there's way more to it than that. And yeah, happy to talk about anything else related to Bitcoin or your own journey, your own learnings as well.
It's interesting because I kind of started getting educated on money at a fairly early age. Like I was in the college libertarians, so I was going down the Ron Paul was a big thing for me back in
And the Fed,
2006, and the Fed. That was huge.
great
Um,
book.
it is. So I understood currency fairly early, and that this was all
Mm.
fake, and that Nixon pulled us off the gold standard after Roosevelt had confiscated all the gold. Like they've been trying to get us off hard money since the beginning of the country almost.
Yep.
If Hamilton could have, he probably would have abolished the gold standard back in the
Oh no,
day.
he was totally going to do it. That there's a whole point, and
Right.
that was Rothschild's backed. That
Yes.
was absolutely because that is the whole London connection back to like the old people in Europe. Hamilton was their first attempt, 100% their first attempt to instill a central bank into the new world. And that's point number 5 on Karl Marx' Communist Manifesto, by the way. A central bank that has the power to print the local currency. Point number 10, we've already covered free public education. So look at the other 8 points of the Communist Manifesto, and you'll find out we live under all of them. But please carry on with how you found Bitcoin.
No, so I was working as a copywriter, and one of my friends was doing a promo on Bitcoin in 2011. And Bitcoin was trading at about $99 or $199, something like that at the time. And it was funny. I was going to meet a guy in a Barnes and Noble when Barnes and Noble still existed, and buy $2,000 worth of Bitcoin, which would have been like 20 Bitcoin, 10 or 20, I forget. Um, and then it felt too shady, and he was going to hand me keys to something, and I was like, I kind of like this theory, but this is just too sketchy to go hand somebody $2,000. So I don't know, what would that be worth today? 20 Bitcoin. I don't want to think about it, but
Or do 20 times 27,000 and you get there.
yeah, it's a decent chunk of change. But then it kind of, again, I saw the crashes too, and I was like, I don't know.
Mhm.
And I remember posting when it got to 10,000 the first time. I think I said something like, "Have you guys ever heard of tulips?" And
Right.
I got cold on it real fast. And then it wasn't until 2020 when it did its second big bump. I think when I first started buying Bitcoin, it was 7,000. So I'm doing all right on it. Um, but I don't know. I like Bitcoin. The theory is beautiful. The math is perfect. Like everything works. But it's kind of like, I guess I was burned so early on with libertarianism, like watching what they did to Ron Paul. And Ron Paul, in my opinion, was the most logical, sane person ever to run for president. Um, and he just got crushed. So like, this is my concern with Bitcoin: is it does look like the right thing, but the right thing doesn't always win. So how much
Mhm.
faith do you have that, I mean, it's going to win at the end of the day?
I am completely convicted. Yeah, that there is there's no way they, you know, and they again, they can. that word, right? It puts goosebumps on people's necks. It turns people away when you talk about they. So let's just say they, in this sense, is the central bank cartel of the world, which stems all the way down from arguably who's really at the tip of the pile here. It's between the Bank of International Settlements that is based in Basel, the Bank of England, everyone knows where that is in London, and the Federal Reserve in New York. Between those three powers that jockey for positioning at all times, um, how can they kill Bitcoin? Well, they can't. They can't. It's a distributed ledger. It's a distributed network that is run by tens of thousands of nodes, which are throughout every single corner of the globe, which not every single one of them can be found and EMP attacked at the same time. And even if they did do that, it only takes one ASIC machine to be plugged in again by somebody somewhere who has electricity to start the whole thing working. So it's over. The Bitcoin network can survive on one machine being plugged in to the power of the sun being plugged directly into the network. The difficulty adjustment will work in such a way that the blocks will still come in every 10 minutes. Those transactions are completely immutable. They happened. They were able to happen. There's no double spending, and nobody can shut that down. And I'm actually thinking about starting a series on the podcast just called Bitcoin Is, and going into all of these kind of deep philosophical kind of and energy related topics, and how it can't be shut down or attacked or made illegal. Sure, people say, "Oh, they'll just make it illegal." Go ahead. They made alcohol illegal. How did that work out? Anything, any government, any dictator, any totalitarian, any authoritarian, any force has ever tried to make illegal has always bloomed and blossomed, either under the table in a black market, call it whatever you will. Life will find a way, and if something adds value to human beings, that thing will spread, and that is what we're seeing with Bitcoin. That this idea of network effects. People talk about network effects with regards to computers, and of course, yes, Bitcoin is computers. You know that's how it works. It's a digital native currency, let's say. Um, but the network effect of the people that use it and find value in it is incredible. Like I said, I was just in Miami. There's 15,000 people in a conference center. Last year there were 20,000 people. It's a little bit less this year because the price of Bitcoin's gone down. So you shake out a lot of the pretenders, but those who truly believe are going to be there year in, year out. Look at for anybody listening, just type in Bitcoin meetup and then your closest city, and then go to one. But make sure it's Bitcoin. Make sure it's not crypto and NFT bros or any of this kind of stuff. Just Bitcoin. Just go there first. If this is your first ever entry point, go to one of those Bitcoin only meetups. If you are a crypto guy or an NFT guy, go to a Bitcoin only meetup. Just see what the difference is. See what how different the conversation is, and ask your questions and be humble, and just try and learn from the people that have been there in the space for a few years, have listened to, have done the 1,000 hours, have done the 100 hours, whatever it is, and you will be absolutely surprised at what is being said and how your brain starts rewiring itself, and how you will be able to bring a specific skill to this new alternative monetary system that is being built, because everybody can bring something different. And it doesn't matter if you're a singer, songwriter, dancer, photographer, podcaster, YouTuber, even if you've done none of this before. When you start interacting with sound money, as you well know, you don't rely on the social construct that it's like being Neo, right, in the Matrix. You don't have to rely on that stuff. You can start being yourself, and you can start finding your true potential. And this comes back again to what we were talking about entrepreneurship earlier. When you when you can hold on to something that you can store your value and your time in, and it can carry value across space and time. Unlike fiat currency, the US dollar is going to be worth less in a year's time than it is today. That's the whole point of inflating the monetary supply, because they have to keep this consumption model going. You know that the money you have today is going to buy you less in a year's time. So you go out and you spend, you buy that new sofa, that new television, that new car, that new shoes, you treat yourself to these new bags and whatever else. That is the whole point of this world that we live in. When you stop interacting with that and thinking on the flip side, it's amazing, and it gives you time to breathe, and it gives you time to think, and it gives you time to figure out who you are actually supposed to be, rather than this mask that you've been wearing. This comes all the way back to the start of our talk. This mask that you've been wearing since you were 5 years of age, you can rip that off, and that feels so fucking good, because now you are saving in something that can't be stolen. And if you're doing it properly, you use cold storage. That, just like you were saying, the private keys. So you buy the Bitcoin from the exchange, or the app, or the dollar cost average service that you're using, and you store that on like a little USB device, which is called a hardware wallet. And only you and only that wallet can have access to the Bitcoin that you have exchanged your fiat currency for. When you feel the power of that, you change, and you change immeasurably. And then when you go and find people that have been through that and that can help you on this journey, you will find the most kind-hearted people that want you to feel what they've felt. And this whole, we call it the social layer of Bitcoin. This whole social layer of Bitcoin, I believe, is layer zero. Reconnecting humanity back to what we were supposed to be, rather than this divided, toxic, Karen kind of community that we've ended up with through divisive political action, which is, this stems all the way back to the Tavistock Institute. I'm not sure if you've gone down that rabbit hole. How
I'm not.
these psyops, right? These psyops, these people, they know exactly how to divide us. Brexit is a perfect example. When you get a 51%, 49% divide in a society, huge win. Look what happened in your last elections with Trump, right? You had America divided. Perfect. That is a perfect scenario for the people that are really pulling the strings over that society. Perfect in the UK. And this is why we have all of these. And look at the whole vaccine thing. They know what they're doing. There are some books out there that are going to turn people's heads upside down. One, I would, for money, I would recommend Eustace Mullins' book called The Secrets of the Federal Reserve. People might have heard of Jekyll Island before, The Creatures from Jekyll Island by Edward Griffin.
Yep.
But Eustace, he wrote this book in the 40s. He was way closer to what was going on, and he had way more access than Griffin did. Eustace was really going deep, and it's an incredible read. So The Secrets of the Federal Reserve by Eustace Mullins, I think, is a critical read for anybody that might be doubting our monetary system and how we got here and why we got here, and how the US dollar is the reserve currency of the world. Like, how is it that if Spain are buying oil from Saudi Arabia, they still have to settle that contract in US dollars? Like, this doesn't make any sense. Well, read that book and you'll find out, along with a lot of other shit.
There's an interesting question so I've been trying to convince my dad to, he's a hard money, gold and silver type of person. And whenever I talk to him about Bitcoin, he's like, but there's no intrinsic value. There's no intrinsic value. So how do you answer? I've been trying with different ways, but how do you answer that question?
What is intrinsic value? Have him define it to you. Because the definition he will have of intrinsic value is a Keynesian definition of what that is. And for most people, intrinsic value just means I can touch it, or like gold. Oh, gold sound money because it makes a sound when you drop it.
I
Like,
think he would say there's
that's
practical use for it outside of
right,
just money.
right. Okay, yeah. Go ahead, put it in your electrical wiring and stuff like that. It's that'll be great, because if it's a real good conductivity metal, then it's just going to make the Bitcoin network work even smoother. So, you know, I would love to work, run the Bitcoin network on gold wiring. Um, yeah, I would have him. I'll ask him that question. Asking a question with a question. Please explain intrinsic value to me, so I can go away and do some more digging into that, and then perhaps I can come back and give you a better answer.
Well, he's going to
Be
listen to
humble.
this. So
Right. Okay. Hi, Dad. Right. Well, then, in that case, there was a article put out there. Let me find it as we're talking. It was by Als Lacrosse about intrinsic value and Bitcoin. I'll have to find you the link afterwards because it's not coming up straight away. I thought I just found it. No, I don't. No, I haven't. Right. Okay. That's the first thing to define. What is intrinsic value? Because if you ask Warren Buffett, he's going to tell you it's connected to the amount of profit that gets kicked off by a business that is above the loss, and blah blah blah. And there you have the intrinsic value. They've got a metric for everything, right? That's what Keynesian economics do. They bamboozle you with this nice math. Watch any Taleb kind of YouTube, and he's like, yo, no, if n equals this, and he's got up on the whiteboard, and it's just the classic kind of three shells dude on the street. Can you pick out the ball from underneath this? And he takes everybody's money. That's what is going on there. So what's the value within Bitcoin? Well, the value within Bitcoin is nobody can inflate it. It is the first medium of exchange. It's the first financial asset, call it whatever you want, that is uninflatable. We know the issuance schedule. So right now, yes, it's an inflationary currency, but we know that schedule. We know the issuance schedule. We know that every 10 minutes, 6.25 Bitcoin is going to be awarded to the mining pool or the single miner that has tracked all of the transactions that happened over the last 10 minutes and has found the number beneath the difficulty adjustment, which is set by the algorithm, to earn the right to add the next block to the blockchain. As soon as that's done, and as soon as that's verified by the tens of thousands of nodes that sit distributed and diffused around the world, as yes, they are all correct, then they earn the 6.25 Bitcoin reward. Multiply that by $27,000, and that's what you have in dollars. This is happening every second of the day. May of next year, that reward goes down to 3.125. This is what we call the halving event. 4 years later, it gets halved again. 4 years later, it gets halved again, all the way out until May 2140. So we know the issuance schedule. This isn't like the Federal Reserve where people are looking at what color tie Jerome Powell is wearing as he goes into the FOMC meeting, and he's wearing a red tie. That must mean it's dovish or hawkish for interest rates. And maybe there's going to be another. Like, this is complete and utter nonsense. You're relying on these people like him and Janet Yellen, or here in Europe, we have people such as Christine Lagarde and her cronies making these decisions over your life savings, of how much they're going to inflate them away and decrease the purchasing power of the dollar that you have spent God knows how many years working for, just gets decreased because of a certain set of people that have decided that they need, for your safety, to print God knows how many more trillions of euros or dollars into the system. So with Bitcoin, we have the complete opposite system. And you have total knowledge of when and how that changes. So you have a completely new um, subsubject, I suppose, of economics, or a completely true subject of economics, because you have this constant. You have the constant right there. Everything else has been subjective in economics. All of these theories that have come out from the Krugmans and the Rubinis of the world that sit there on their thrones and tell you, oh, and who's the worst one? Oh, Steve Hanke. Yeah, he's a funny guy. When he starts coming out with all of his inflation rhetoric and why we need inflation and whatever else, and why Bitcoin is bad. Yeah, that's where I would point your dad to go and start looking. It's like, define intrinsic value, then go find a different answer, like an Austrian economist's answer to intrinsic value. Look at Hazlitt or Rothbard or Hayek
That's
or
probably where he'd
someone like
start.
that.
He introduced me
Right.
to Austrian economics. It's he's not like
Okay.
a noob on this subject. It's just he's a hard money guy
Yes.
and it died in the wool.
So
Um,
so gold was perfect. Gold was our only true money, and the same is happening now. So how did we come to find gold? Gold was a grassroots. Well, it had to be, right, because we weren't connected like we were thousands of years ago, like we are now. So where did gold? How did gold emerge as a monetary property? It's fascinating when you look into it. How did human civilization settle on gold as a medium of exchange,
across cultures.
which across cultures, which catapulted humanity into like what we have, become. It's crazy. Like I said before, the only species on Earth that use a medium of exchange to express value. Before that, you had barter, and a lot of people out there are thinking, "Well, we'll just go back to the barter system." It's like, sorry, guys, not going to work. We have this coincidence of wants problem, which doesn't go away. That's how we got to gold in the first place. So, if goat milk guy in the marketplace back in the day wanted some apples, then if apple guy needed some goat's milk, then they could make an exchange. But if not, then you were shit out of luck, right? Then along comes gold, where everybody's like, whoa, this shiny new metal, this is nice. I could keep this. I can use this to buy as many other goods as I possibly want in the marketplace here. And you've solved that problem. How did we discover it? God only knows. I mean, like, mining wasn't around in those days. Were you just picking it up off the floor? You know,
Going in
I,
caves with
I, I know,
your hammer or your
yeah,
wooden
I,
mallet and
no idea. But the idea that it's the one element on the periodic table that can, it doesn't rust. It absolutely, it's malleable at the same time. It can carry, value across space and time. And here we are today, thousands of years later, and it is still accepted as a form of payment if you find the right person. Now, a lot of gold bugs will say, I could walk in, a gold coin will buy me bed and breakfast in any hotel in any country in the world, or, buy me a suit on Savile Row, like whatever the old saying is. A gold coin can still buy me a tailored suit on Savile Row in London. It's like, yeah, okay, sure. I'd like to see you try. Walk into walk into the Marriott Hotel tomorrow and go and spend whatever you like. Get the penthouse, do all of this stuff, and when it comes to checkout, push across the counter 2 gold coins and see what happens. You're not making a transaction. I guarantee it. The police are going to be called. You're going to be shoved away somewhere. There's going to be all kinds of questions. Where this come from? It's not like the teller is going to just get the manager down and say, "Oh yeah, fine. Well, yeah, just put it in the gold drawer in the checkout till." Like it's
right.
nonsense. And of course, it carries the cost of storage problem, like we were talking about earlier. If you are, where do you store it? Do you have a nice safe at home? Then you are a central point of failure. Do you outsource it to someone else? Then you have another point of failure, and you have expensive fees. And 1933 all over again, Executive Order 6102 could be completely rolled out from the annals of history, where, if you quite rightly said earlier, April 1933 stole everybody's gold by making it illegal to hoard or use gold. And it had to be turned in to your nearest bank and then shipped to the central bank. When not only that, did he do that, he promptly, a few months later, if I'm not mistaken with my timing, might have been a year, uh, reset the price of gold as well. So you got double rugged in that scenario. So why is Bitcoin different? Well, Bitcoin, people call Bitcoin digital gold or gold 2.0, which can be moved at the speed of sound, speed of light, whatever analogy you want to use, around the world. And you can actually, it is a bearer instrument. You can take complete control of it. It is yours if you have that device, and you can have that device backed up in several different places. It doesn't even need to be in your home. And that device, the only way you can access it is with a password, which only you would know. And if you try it 3 or 5 times or 10 times, depending on the device, then that is bricked. And even if somebody did have it and they can't break that password, all you got to do is buy a new device, put in your real password, and you have access to your funds again in Bitcoin. Or you could just remember those 12 words or 24 words. I wouldn't recommend doing that, because then you are the single point of failure. But in the example of, you had to leave the United States for whatever reason, and you wanted to take all of your wealth with you, you just exchange it into Bitcoin. You write those 12 words down on a piece of paper. You put that in your wallet or in an RFID sleeve or something. You keep that safe, or you remember it, or both, and you leave the country
Yeah, I
with
mean
your
that
whole wealth.
it's that's the most beautiful part of it, is how do you get the gold out of the country if something goes wrong, you have to escape. It's actually last week's podcast was with a guy, Tane Nix, he does expat stuff. So one of the things he offers is helping people buy and store precious metals in different countries. So he doesn't want the single point of failure. It's just a different way of looking at it. But Bitcoin's, I mean, it's the simplest, most elegant solution for traveling with enormous sums of money. Like, you can't get on a plane with $100,000 in cash. You will literally get stopped. There's just no
I
way to
came to
do
the
it.
US. I came to the US last week, and they wanted to know on my form of paper whether I was carrying $10,000 worth or more of currency or merchandise, or
Yep.
I can't remember what the third currency was. The third point was, or maybe that was it. Um, like, this is crazy. Like, who should ever know that? And then I was
Right.
thinking, well, I am, because it's in my head. You know?
I wouldn't
But
admit that to them.
no, because you don't need to, and that is the power of it. And what I want to say to the gold bugs out there is, like, we are beating the same drum. Like, we got this together. We got this. There's no divide here, because there are a lot of Bitcoiners out there that have some gold or some silver, and there are a lot of
And
gold and silver guys out there that have some Bitcoin, right?
yeah,
And then whatever else you need, you can have, if you're in the US, you can have your guns, you can have your ammo. We can't. It's a little bit harder for us over here in Euroland to do all that kind of stuff. But you can have your tinned food. You can do your homesteading. You can pickle your own fruit and your own vegetables. You can store your own meat, as we were talking about. Like, not having any Bitcoin as part of that, it makes no. It's just another arrow in your quiver. Like,
yeah,
protect yourself from the state. If you don't have Bitcoin as part of that playbook, you please do 10 hours worth of just pure Bitcoin education.
it's it does seem like the people that believe, everybody believes in diversifying, especially with safety stuff.
Mhm.
Like, you don't want just one, like, I don't want just one gun to protect my house, right? There's a lot of different steps I'm going to take, including hiding addresses, all that. Like, you don't have just one single way that you can be taken advantage of. If somebody get past this, what's your other option? What's your plan B? So even if Bitcoin's
Mhm.
just a plan B or plan C for you, it's worth having a little, I would think. So I have
Absolutely.
one kind of theory, because Bitcoin needs to hit a mass adoption tipping point at some point for the vision to really take over. So I've been wondering. I kind of think I think it's inevitable at some point the U.S. goes to a CBDC. I just don't know how they get away from CBDC and UBI with a level of inflation and destruction they're doing right now. So my theory hypothesis that I've been thinking about a lot. I'm not entirely convinced on it, but I think if they implement the CBDC, people are going to go, "Oh, digital currencies," and it's actually going to drive Bitcoin insane. So,
Mhm.
does that seem like a viable theory to you, or is there another tipping point you see for Bitcoin?
Yeah, I think that's a great theory, and it's something I believe in as well because the CBDC is coming, guys. It's scary as fuck. It's coming. Get ahead of it, really, because yeah, like you said, when there's a long way to go to mass adoption. You're right. 99% of the world still has no clue what Bitcoin is. You're ahead of the game, guys. Like you are ahead just by listening to this podcast. And I know you're not a Bitcoin focused podcast, but you have people like me on. And these touch points are so important. They're so important. You might need 5 or 10 nudges to go and pick up that book or read that article or watch that YouTube video or listen to a podcast, but you got to have it. So it's so important that these touch points just keep coming up. CBDCs, they are coming. They are. This is the whole part of the Great Reset plan, right? They've done it before. Bretton Woods was a reset of the currency system, the global currency system. That's what they decided after World War II at the Bretton Woods conference, that we're going to peg all of the currencies against the US dollar, and that US dollar is going to be pegged to all of these tons of gold that was repatriated out of Europe during the Second World War into Fort Knox, apparently, that we will have all of these US dollars, these paper bills, these promissory notes, these warehouse receipts, call them whatever you want, and we'll keep the gold, and there'll only be X amount in circulation. Well, that lasted what, 26 years, until 1971. You've already brought this up with Nixon rug pulling the world on their purchasing power and their savings. The same's going to happen with CBDCs. This is a central planners. This is a central banking, authoritarian, totalitarian dictatorship, freak show's wet dream. And this is what they're moving to. And it's going to happen. It's coming. And how are they going to push it out? Well, the problem with these people is they have incredibly low time preference. They would take years and decades. Like I said before, they tried with Hamilton first. They didn't get it done until Christmas week of 1913 is when the Federal Act Reserve was passed. The Federal Reserve Act was passed. When everybody was on, it was done unconstitutionally. Christmas week of 1913. All in that book I referenced earlier, Eustace Mullins. But they'd been trying for centuries. They got it done. And look at what has happened since then. 2 catastrophic wars on a global scale. They were engineered.
Oh, yeah.
Vietnam. I mean, look at Vietnam. Vietnam is just like it's that one is just crazy, especially when you watch. Go on YouTube and just do a quick YouTube search of Vietnam draft and watch a television program where they have a commentator commentating on 2 dudes in suits pulling numbers out of a velvet bag for birthdays of young men that are going to be sent off to the jungle to fight in a war that they had no business fighting. It's the destruction of families, the destruction of property, the destruction of everything is so sick. And this is all because they had the power over the money. And they still do. And what they're going to do with central bank digital currencies is try and move that all completely digitally, because we all have these phones in our hands, which we need to communicate with each other. These are vital, critical tools for us for a global economy, and they're being co-opted. And what they're going to tell you is just download Fed app or whatever they call it. In the UK, they're going to call it Britcoin, which is disgusting. And they're going to tell you, they're going to come up with excuses. Oh, first, what have we been doing for so long? This whole contactless idea, the cash card idea, the ATM card idea, the debit card idea. People now just pay on Apple Pay or Google Pay. They pay with their phones all of the time. It's all part of this low time preference plan to capture you into the most ridiculous surveillance tool that they could ever have imagined, beyond any kind of James Bond script. Like the fact that they now, not only do they have the ownership over the currency, but they have the ownership of how to program it, who to give it to, when to give it to, when to cut you off. You've bought too much fuel this week. You've bought too much meat this week. You can't buy guns with that. You can't do this. You can't do that. And it's going to track every time. If you're running a business, every time you make a sale, you'll just be taxed at point of sale. Every time you do anything, because like I've said twice already, money is the thing that separates our species, is what we use to communicate value to each other. If you can tap into that, then control it and track it. Everything, every second of the day, every transaction, we're in a very, very bad place. But it's coming. And it's coming quicker than most people think.
And I think they're sowing the seeds of their own destruction with it. Like there's only so much that people can put up with. And because they came up with it after there was already an alternative to it. And I think that's actually the thing. It's just like the internet. They never saw coming. They used to control all the information, and they're losing their minds because they can't control the internet right now. It's going to be the same thing with money. They're going to try to come in too late to backstop it, and it's just not going to work. But there's going to be so much devastation in the meantime.
That's precisely right. People think there's like internet.com. Like, no, nobody owns the internet. There are companies who are working on the internet and have big swathes of it, Amazon, Google, the FANGs, whatever. They don't own the internet. The internet is an open protocol that anybody can access, and any one of us can spin up a website, do whatever. Nobody owns the internet. Nobody owns the Bitcoin network. It's just another network. And you got to ask yourself, do I want to be part of this captured monetary social credit score system network where they're going to track everything I do? Or do I want to be part of a monetary network where absolutely anybody can opt into it? Doesn't matter whether you have a bank account or not. Doesn't matter how old you are. Doesn't matter if you're from any corner of the world. In a fair manner, and just by interacting with this network, I am now connected globally to a whole new economy, which is fair. Like I mentioned earlier, it has an issuance schedule where everybody knows, is not manipulated, is not controlled. Yeah, that's pretty compelling. Just to get a little slice of that, just to try it and see, how does this make a difference to my life? What doors does this open? What networking opportunities does this bring to me to meet people? What business opportunities does this bring to me? How can this further my life socially, interactively? It's why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you just pick up a book, read an article, listen to YouTube, spend that 10 hours, go to that meetup, whatever it is, because they're everywhere now, and just see for yourself what's going on. Take a look under the hood, because what you're reading in the newspapers is nonsense. What you're seeing on the television is nonsense. What you're seeing on Squawk Box and whatever else is nonsense.
Well, I think that's actually a beautiful place to wrap this up. We've been going for almost an hour and a half. Is there any place that we can send people, or what projects are you working on that you want to tell people about right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So we started the conversation talking about my book. That's called Choose Life. I'd love to send people to Consensus Network to go and find that, rather than Amazon. That's spelled with a K. Consensus Network, and that is run by Bitcoiners. And you can buy the book there. And if you use the code BITten, BITTEN, you'll get a 10% discount. If you pay with Bitcoin via the Lightning Network, you get an extra 10% discount because they believe in sound money, and they should they should give you a discount if you're willing to use sound money. So that's one place to go and check that out. My podcast is called Once Bitten. That can be found on all of the usual podcast platforms. And I've been running that for 3.5 years. My daughter asks the first question on each show. She's been doing that since she was 9, so she's now 12, and
And
she
it's
was just in
adorable.
Miami with. Yeah. Thank you. So you get to hear, Bitcoin explained to a 12-year-old, which is great. I think that's very much needed. We need less confusion in the world, and less people pretending to be something they're not by using flagrant words and bigging themselves up. And if you wanted to learn about our travels whilst we were doing that, I did keep a blog going whilst we were traveling, and that is called Princes Off the Grid. And if you just put .weebly.com after that, it will take you straight to it.
I'll put links for all the three of those in the show notes here. Well,
Thank
this
you
has
very
been
much, brother,
this has
and
been
appreciate.
a lot of fun. I love this conversation. I think we got into a lot of interesting areas.
Yeah, absolutely, and appreciate everything you're doing. Educating as many people as you can about freedom, self sovereignty. Bitcoin plugs directly into that,
Mhm.
and what you're doing as well, teaching freelancers how to get out there and live their best lives and not be strapped to a desk. Don't make the same mistake I made. I spent 18 years looking into screens and not appreciating the world and the people in my life around me. So, thank you for what you're doing, brother.
All right, everybody, stay free. Hey, if you thought that video was good, please click the like button and don't forget to subscribe. It really helps me out. Thanks.